Hallo und herzlich willkommen zur dritten ASQF Netweek, zur dritten Runde unseres immer beliebter werdenden Formats Powered by Alten GmbH. Ich bin Dominik Herwagen und freue mich, dass Sie sich eingewählt haben zu einem unserer kostenlosen Vorträge unserer Online-Konferenz des ASQFs, Ihrem digitalen Expertennetzwerk. Noch bis Donnerstag haben wir ein volles Programm und Sie können sich auch noch kurzfristig anmelden. Neu bei der Netweek ist die Thementagausrichtung mit Schwerpunkt heute Testautomatisierung. Da möchte ich mich gerne bedanken bei Quentinel GmbH und Trimetis GFB IT Team Consulting GmbH als Thementagssponsoren. Heute haben wir ein besonderes Webinar vor uns. Es ist zweisprachig, Englisch und Deutsch, und deswegen gebe ich jetzt auch noch mal ganz kurz eine kleine englische Einführung und stelle unsere Experten vor. Welcome to the third ASQF Netweek. I'm Dominique and I'm happy that everyone called in. Today we are focusing on test automation. Today we have Nikhil, Sharma and Dirk Strubberg from Quentinel, who are talking about do's and don'ts of test automation. The first part of that was re-recorded because we had some technical issues, so don't worry or don't wonder if globings are changing later on. So I'm gonna hand over to Dirk Strubberg and Nikhil Sharma from Quentinel, to our presentation, Do's and Don'ts of Test Automation.
Okay, vielen Dank, Dominik. Das ist ja als zweisprachiger Vortrag angekündigt, deswegen gehe ich jetzt mal aufs Deutsche, werde ein bisschen was über Quentinel erzählen und über unseren Vortrag. Danach werden wir den Vortrag überwiegend in Englisch führen als Unterhaltung. Damit ihr folgen könnt, haben wir aber die Charts auf Deutsch gemacht und wir hoffen, das ist dann so okay. Also, wer ist Quentinel? Quentinel ist ein Spezialist für Testautomation und kommt aus Finnland. Da wurden wir 2002 gegründet von vielen Leuten, die früher mal bei Nokia waren und vielen jungen Talenten. Und einer davon hat 2005 Robot Framework veröffentlicht. Und das zeigt schon, woher wir kommen. Also wir haben schon ganz von Anfang an mit Testautomation zu tun gehabt und sind auch bis heute diesem ganzen Thema Open Source, Robot Framework und alles, was in Open Source Tools damit zu tun hat, sehr, sehr verbunden. Inzwischen sind 15 Jahre vergangen. Wir haben uns kräftig weiterentwickelt. Wir testen heute 10 Millionen Lines of Code täglich, die allermeisten davon automatisch. Und wir sind mit unserer Lösung Marktführer in Skandinavien. Heute wird Ihnen Nikhil Sharma, das ist der Produktmanager unserer Lösung Quentinel Pace, einiges erzählen, was man beachten sollte und was man vermeiden sollte, wenn es um Testautomation geht. Ich bin Dirk Strubberg, Managing Director der deutschen Niederlassung von Quentinel, und ich würde sagen, wir fangen jetzt mal an. Und ich gehe, okay, das haben wir schon gehabt. Wir gehen jetzt direkt in die Präsentation über. Ich werde jetzt aufs Englische wechseln. So Nikhil, let's start our conversation. We thought we start about, but why do we talk about test automation now? Because everyone is already testing. And I just found some really interesting numbers in the World Quality Report that shows what are the bottlenecks in testing right now. So 79% of the people asked say they would need more budget for testing, and 57% say, oh, I don't have enough time for testing. 60% say that maintaining the test environment is the biggest challenge, and 33% use a DevOps approach, which brings a lot of more new requirements and challenges to testing. So given that as an intro, what has changed and what makes testing also to change?
Yeah, very excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, Drake. I think before even we go what has changed, we should take a step back, look at the numbers that you showed, and a common theme which trickled down all these numbers was that not enough time, not enough budget. Or is it that testing is then very underestimated and overlooked phenomena in software development? And the reason why it has been historically so is if you Think about,
sorry.
all right,
No.
nice picture. So if you think about testing something or then developing a new feature, there are two different paradigms there. When you're implementing a new feature in a product that adds value to your product directly, you have more. You're probably implementing an end-to-end business case, or you're implementing a new feature. So the ideology behind it is you're enabling something. You are making your product more attractive. And then when you think about testing, testing doesn't add a direct value. It doesn't add a direct feature. And there's a thing about testing is, or quality in general, what people say is, or what our CEO says, that at least that quality is something that you become aware of it when it is missing. So if a product is behaving really, really bad, that's when you start to understand, oh, the quality is poor. So the added value of testing is very indirect. And if you look at from these two perspectives and approach a business owner or decision maker and say like, hey, I have to invest a month in testing and this is the budget for it. As a you could also use this month for adding a new feature, maybe attracting more customers or giving them an enhanced experience. What we have seen in industry, it often goes towards, oh, let's add a new feature rather than budget it for testing. Now, sadly, this has been the case, but I think industry has been changing a lot. And as you said, yeah, we have been testing, but it's not fast enough for the current landscape, and that's why there is a turtle on the slide. So it's not fast enough. And why it is not fast enough? What has changed is, if you look at software, I think digitalization has crossed boundaries. It's not anymore limited to a country with certain GDP or certain skill set. It's everywhere. All the countries are participating in digitalization, and they're also absorbing digitalization, which means the market has become more diversified, and the competition is high. Especially if you look into even in B2B space, the competition is very high, but B2C even further so. Like, there's even higher competition, and the customers don't stick to your product if the quality is poor. So you need to make sure that there is enough quality. Now, also the Agile Manifesto came in 2001, then DevOps came in 2009. It has changed, it has transformed the ways software is developed nowadays. We are moving really fast, and as with everything that moves really fast, you need something to ensure that you still have the control, and that's what testing does. So if you think about improving new feature, building new complex things, that's a fly that's taking you up. So you need like some sort of security, risk management, and this is where testing becomes really, really important. And I don't think that DevOps is even possible if there is no test automation. So if you look at this beautiful infinite loop of DevOps, of planning, building, deploying, and learning, you can't deploy unless you have tested something enough. And with DevOps in place, and people and the companies and teams rapidly accelerating their release cycle, one major beast of testing, which we call as regression testing, is just growing exponentially, and no amount of manpower can do that. Then again, like, the paradigm of how we develop things, the architecture of applications has changed as well. So if you look at earlier, back in the days, we had monolithic architectures. Now we are implementing microservices. So all these services are talking to each other. You think about business IT landscape. Now it's like it's a jungle of many applications interacting with each other, and your end-to-end processes are basically traveling across that jungle. Now all these applications have different release cycles. Some of them are cloud-based, others are on-prem deployed. Some of the applications you have earlier access to, others you just get them as a ready-made application. Now in that mesh, if you will, it becomes very, very critical to to ensure that those critical processes are which are running across those applications, irrespective of all these dimensions, they still work and seamlessly and uninterruptedly. So a lot of those things have changed, and that's why I don't think personally that you can, as a company, you can stay competitive enough only relying on manual testing.
Yeah. Okay, so if you start as a manual tester and you go on, you start, okay, it might be really helpful to start test automation. This is a long journey, and every journey, it starts with a first step. And so I would like just to get back to you and where you started the journey into test automation. And just if you could give us a brief introduction in how you became, a test automation specialist, and what were the first steps that you have been taken?
Yeah, it was a very interesting journey, and like all these journeys, it always had its sweets and sours, and highs and lows. And I would really like to share it since you asked for it. Have a background. There's education called testing education. We don't have universities providing you diploma engineer in software testing or any testing. So it's always like a subdomain. You learn it maybe briefly, but I don't even think there are courses on like proper testing. So I ended up in a large Finnish companies internal spin-off. So it was like a small startup team that I was working for, and my first task was to be a manual tester. Now, before I even got there, the state of the art back then in that spin-off was so that there were only developers and no testers. So the developers were doing testing, all that testing, and they found some bugs, but not all the bugs. I don't even know if it's possible to find all the bugs, but they found some bugs. And yeah, every time they wanted to deploy it into the production, their customer success team or delivery team, they would have nightmares, because right after the deployment, all the screen starts to go wrong and all the alarms, bells starts whistling that, hey, okay, this warehouse is down, another warehouse is down, okay, this is happening, or we haven't seen it. And then there's a constant like finger pointing, who has done what and why is it not working? Hasn't it been tested enough? So I started working there as a dedicated tester. So we, of course, I had another colleague of mine who was responsible then for planning the test cases. Plus, we would have like exploratory testing and everything. And the system was very complex. So there were actual physical robots. I think there are 6 or 7 major components of software. There was a user access point. There was a website to interact with that physical robot. Then there were mobile applications and all these different browsers and OS versions and whatnot. Now, when we started implementing that testing strategy, we realized it's going to take me 2.5 to 3 months to test those manually. And it's a long process. And now, earlier, what they were doing is they were pushing out releases every month or every 2 months or something. When I started working, these developer friends of mine who were welcoming me earlier, they started to hate me because, well, hate is a strong word, but they got annoyed. I was sitting right next to them, speaking in their ears all the time, hey, this is broken and that's broken.
So you felt like Jerry.
Yeah, I was the Jerry of our team. And the incentives are very different. And that's why you really need a dedicated tester. The incentives of a developer and tester are very different. A developer is incentivized on developing new features. Financial incentive, of course, personal motivation comes from developing new features, complex algorithms. And for testers, the financial and personal, all kind of incentives come from breaking things. So when a developer is testing, they basically run through happy paths. And now happy path is something which a user would take even happy paths can reveal a lot of bugs. But with developers, you approach your creation from a point of view that it's not probably broken. And from a tester, you approach a creation, I have to find all the places where it is broken. It's very different. So there were a lot of bugs that we found, which we actually saw that once we were fixing those bugs and then making releases, the issues and tickets were getting lesser by time. But what happened is that I was becoming a bottleneck. There's only as much as one person can test. There's only as much as 10 people can test. And you can always scale the headcount. You can have, well, financially, it's not a viable solution to have 100 people doing manual testing. But I became bottleneck. That's when we started looking for test automation solution. And as often as it is, my test automation career also started from a hobby. That you are the manual tester. Why don't you? We have heard about this test automation. Can you do it? I said, well, sure, I can investigate. And we started working on it. The first thing I had to choose was a framework for me to work on. Now, I chose robot framework, which is became a very natural choice to me because it's in the user communities. Back in the day, that big. Now it's really big. It's spreading in Germany and the US and India, but still had a good user community around it. And then, most importantly, it was free. Now, as a spin-off, smaller company, it's very important to have it as free. But what I didn't realize back then, and probably a lot of people don't realize it, that what's often upfront appears to be free really gets expensive in the longer run. Anyhow, robot framework was great. It was easy for me to pick it up. I have done some coding in my but it doesn't really it does require certain coding, but not a lot, because they provide good enough abstraction layer. Yeah, so we implemented a lot of automation test cases, mostly regression test cases, and for the applications which were stable and could be easily automated. And we shrunk that release cycle from our release time from 3 months to something like 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks. And that was great.
Yeah,
it's really great. We're finding bugs, doing the regression, making sure things which were working before aren't working, are still working, and if not working, then we were fixing them. But what happened from there is, at some point, since I started building my own environments and own infrastructure and everything by myself, because it was upfront free, at some point my robots started to become a bottleneck. Because they were getting corrupt. There was a version mismatch. There were dependencies which were not well taken care of, and a lot of other things. And then I started to struggle and wonder with the idea that, okay, the application under test is okay, the test cases are okay, but still the results don't look good. Why so? And we realized that. But basically, if I tell you, my robot was actually a physical CPU. I haven't seen a CPU now in like 5-6 years, but there was a real CPU, which was my robot. So yeah, that's my experience. And after that, I moved on and built for a few major corporations, large-scale test automation infrastructure on what I have learned. And then when I've done that enough, in Sentinel, we realized that we have done these massive test automation projects, and a lot of those projects have few things in common, and then things that we have learned from our mistakes. Why not bring it all together into a ready-to-use product? And then I became product manager for Sentinel Base.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So what I understood is that the journey into test automation is like from bottleneck to bottleneck. It is like evolving, and with every step you reach the next border. And so it is. I think you might think, wow, it is a hard way. It is a hard way to because you thought, okay, I do some test automation and that will solve my problems. And then the next what happens is you get new problems, and after that the next. So what would you think, and that is the next, our next topic is, what would be a good starting point and how to avoid running from one bottleneck into the next?
Yeah, I mean, I think I also believe that, you know, running in from one bottleneck to an advanced bottleneck is a sign of improvement and evolvement. And you have one problem, then you fix it, and then you get an advanced problem. But that being said, I think a lot of problems can be, you don't have to deal with them if you have thought it through enough beforehand. So there is no need to reinvent wheels at many point in time just because you want to do everything by yourself. And then I think one major thing what I have witnessed in industry is that software testing is, as we were talking earlier, has been treated as a second-class citizen of software development or software development entire life cycle. And that's, I think, is one of the biggest problem or challenges in the industry. So when you develop a product, it's never a hobby thing. Or it can be if you run a one-man startup. But in a big company, there's a clear strategy. You make clear decisions. You develop those standard processes. Okay, how are we going to develop it? How are we going to work in teams? Where is it our control?
I go to the next. Yeah.
Code review. Yeah, code review and all these things. But when it comes to test automation, it's rarely the case. Yeah. So you have to develop it from a hobby to actually have a test automation strategy. Like think it, move it like way up the line when you are starting and doing test automation, and ask certain questions from yourself, from your organization.
Yeah. So that just one question. We all know that engineers, they like to build things. But that, you know, doing a strategy, is that a question of more test management than testing itself?
I think it's both. So you need to have a strategy, also a test management point of view, or product development or product management stage, but also you need a strategy at testing place as well. Or I wouldn't kind of separate these two into two different decision making points. I think these two together should make those decisions. And so the few questions that you would be asking yourself is for any project is like why, how, and what's of test automation. So basically, why do you want to do test automation? And I'm pretty sure like you need it, but what is the core philosophy behind doing it? For some people, it's just, oh, we're gonna have 200 test automation cases. Robots will do it. Yes, but it's not like it's not like a silver bullet for your problems. You need to define, I want to do test automation because it's gonna speed up some hypothesis. It's gonna speed up my release cycle, which means my test automation has an end result into an enhanced customer experience. So bring the customer right into the decision-making process, that this is why we want to do test automation, and not just because having an insane amount of releases per day. And then what are the systems under test? Because some systems are either old enough to be test automation friendly, or then are test automation phobic. So for example, I was working in this one OEM, original equipment manufacturer company, really big one, and they had a few old traditional few of the traditional tool sets which they were supposed to discontinue like maybe 3 years down the line. And just to make test automation for it would have needed us 1 more year to enable that system to interact with test automation. We made a strategic decision. There's no point doing test automation for it because we're going to discontinue it anyways after three years. And then few of, like if you think about web automation, web application automation, you often have those captchas, like really a naive example. You have captchas when you have to read a number or image and then fill it in just to ensure that you are not a robot. And that's not worth automating, in my opinion. You'd rather do it manually than automate that process. or then disable it for test automation. So then again, like who is your testing audience? So who is going to actually use test automation or build test automation? Is it more like a business owner kind of audience which doesn't have enough coding experience? Neither do they have experience nor they are willing to learn coding. Is it more coder kind of like complex hardcore coder who can program anything, or is it more like a manual tester transforming to test automation? Because all these questions will actually make you choose a framework which will be widely adopted. And when a framework is widely adopted, it means you have a shared maintenance, which brings the overall maintenance low. Speaking of which, then you would be looking at, okay, I know all these questions. I also know what are my system under test look like. Are they cross-platform? Is it mobile? Is it desktop or web or some embedded systems or IoT devices or a car, or what is it? That's again gonna facilitate the choice of your test automation framework. And then one more important thing is the mentioned in the maintenance of test environment. So that's one key thing that you also would be asking yourself, that hey, just for a brief for the audience, test environment is basically an environment where you have it could be physical or in the cloud or anywhere. It's basically an environment where you are executing your test cases, and that is a very important strategic choice. Where should it be, or what kind of should it be? Because when you start scaling your test automation, the scaling of test environments will become a bottleneck. So when I refer to my robot, that was a test environment that became a bottleneck.
Yeah, exactly. So once you answer those questions and you got the strategy right, and you decided to launch that test automation missile we see here, we came to the building blocks, and you just mentioned the test environment as the most important.
So well, I was like saying earlier, all these questions that you are asking and trying to figure out the answers for. Now, when you know what kind of tester group you have, and what are your application under tests, and what are the connection types, it will help you decide what kind of test automation framework you're gonna choose going forward. Like for example, for me, looking at the systems under test, applications under test, I realized that okay, robot framework will do justice for my cause. Now, also need to think, when you're gonna scale these test automation from one team, one person's hobby to at a corporate level, when you have 20 teams working together and each team has their own test automation, how does this framework of mine, is this appendable? Is it something which I can scale? Does it have capabilities to integrate with other tools or products or other sources, as against like a monolithic product which doesn't integrate with anything? The application under test makes you think from a point of view. So what I'm trying to aim at here is that, for example, if you have needs in testing a web app and mobile and desktop native application, you could either find one product or one framework which can, you know, how do you say, shoot two birds with an arrow. So one product to deal with all these applications and do performance and API testing, or then you can end up having 10 different products where you're maintaining those 10 different products. And then like if you think from development standard practices, like one of the standard practices to version control your code. And we really encourage, like we have built in our product, that if you do testing, make sure that you version control your test. It gives you traceability, it gives you control on what's going on, and you know who is contributing to what, as against what I have seen in earlier in those experiences, that test cases they're just lying on physical devices of those test automation hobbies, if I will, you know, local machines. So you have build those blocks so that, you know, tomorrow when you scale it and use it across, it really starts to deliver the value that that you are building it for.
Okay, so we have learned something about the do's, how you should start, what you should look at, how you should build up your test automation. But what about the don'ts? So what is the biggest enemy, the biggest beast in test automation that you have to tame?
I don't want to say it, human mind. but,
The human mind, it's always the worst.
Innovation of human mind. No, it's one of the things which is like least spoken about. Now it's getting some traction, but one of the things that's least spoken about, and in my opinion, and all the studies that I have been reading, is maintenance. You would be amazed to know that around you're looking between 60 to 70% of the time that a test automation specialist amount of time that a test automation specialist end up spending in maintenance tasks. And now one thing I didn't speak about earlier, but now I think it's the perfect time to mention is when I'm talking about maintenance, it's not only about maintaining your script, it's also about maintaining your test environments. So just to give like a brief on, so a test environment is a machine. It could be a physical machine, cloud, virtual machine, or anything, but it's a place where your test automation is being executed. So when I was earlier talking about in my experience that a robot became a bottleneck, so this is specifically what I was talking about. The maintenance of the environments where test automation was running became a bottleneck for us. It started getting corrupted, it started getting like version mismatches, and now we were so the tests were failing or not even being executed, not because there was something wrong in the application under test or in test itself, but the test automation environment got corrupted. So that's one place of maintenance. Another is if you have a lot of different products or lot of different frameworks that you're working with as different hobbies in different teams doing test automation, that's a huge maintenance efforts, like for your support team or IT, whoever is going to maintain that. Another maintenance effort that I've seen in this kind of open source way of doing things is like when also I was working with robot framework, and how teams implement those when they're not being implemented as a managed service. So if I would give an example from a robot frameworks ecosystem pitfalls, is what happens is when you have robot framework, people start building their libraries. Now there's an end keyword which you're gonna use to write your test case, and then different teams start to get their own abstraction level. So for me, click on login button is a good enough abstraction level if I write a test case, but for someone it might be click on the second login button, which is in green color. So what you're doing is you're basically building different abstraction layers on those libraries, and everyone is just re-implementing keywords. And what it ends up into is that you have a massive number of those keywords or libraries or however you want to call them, and you're maintaining something like 100,000 keywords, and then you only have 200 test cases which are using those. That's another maintenance issue. And then this version controlling, just like, I don't know if I can emphasize it enough on that. That's very, very important when you have your test cases. Treat them as you treat your code. It's not a second class thing. But think about it, think about maintenance, because someday you have to think about it. So it's, when you say that keep your friends close and enemy closer, this is one of the things that you need to really think beforehand.
Very good. So after having struggled with all those problems and building a product based on all those experience and how to struggle with maintenance. How would you say about test automation and software testing coming from the cloud is the thing we should do in the future? What are the pros and the cons of going cloud with test automation?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is like more of a reference also like to what we thought when we started building this continual pace product. This is robotic software testing, test automation from cloud product, cross-platform. Is that so? There is a huge shift in towards cloud technologies, and this is not new, but it's been there for like, if I throw a number, 10 years, last 10 years. And the advantages of cloud technologies are pretty similar. Like if there's a company going through a cloud shift strategy, then they talk about those key benefits of cloud, and they remain the same irrespective of where you are implementing that cloud strategy to. And even when you think about test automation, one of the biggest advantages of doing it from cloud is the scalability and maintenance of those test environments that I was earlier referring to. So when you think about continual pace, so what we do is our end customer, let's say our end customer is doing a test automation, and then they have a need that, oh, I need 100 more test environments. Mm-hmm. Now, in a traditional setup, like in the days, if you were still dealing with like a hard machine, you really have to acquire those 100 machines, and then you really have to hook those machines to your CI/CD pipelines or to your test automation infrastructure, and that's a huge investment cost, like from money point of view and also from time point of view. Now, again, when you have those 100 test environments, you have to maintain those 100 test environments. Now, what happens in Pace is, when you need those 100, third thing, when you buy those 100 test environments, you get to keep them. So if they are somewhere running, there's always like a fixed cost and running cost with them. Now, what happens with continual pace is that you can spin off these robots or test environments on your will whenever you need one. So it's demand-based scaling. So let's say you have a production update coming on and you have a massive demand for test automation now. You need 100 test environments. You just click and spin off those. Then you churn your test cases, as many as they are. I mean, in my experience, the most scalable test automation I have seen is they're running something like 600 hours of test automation a day and 20,000 test cases a day during their production updates. And once the production update is done, you can basically kill them. So you get a spike in your demand. You got it addressed by the test environments. Now you don't have it, so you don't have to bear the cost of it. A second thing is like, plus you need some test environments forever. Something that's always running in background, something that's always doing the smoke testing and sanity check of your application. And for those, you don't have to worry about maintenance, because the maintenance then falls on us or whoever is the managed service provider, or if you are building a cloud testing of your own, then with the cloud test environment providing team. So in cloud, you can like wipe it off clean, the test environments, and keep the versions in your control. Like, for example, in web testing, so what is the test automation framework version there? What is the library version? What is the browser version? Supporting Chrome driver version, everything. So these are like massive benefits. I don't know if I'm able to emphasize, because I'm like really passionate about this maintenance area of test automation. So I can't like put more emphasis on saying how crucial it is, because it really becomes a bottleneck once you start to scale. And then last thing, which is also pretty great which is actually has been pretty great in not so great COVID times, is that our customers now who have been thinking about, oh, we can't do testing from home or from anywhere. So basically our customers' testing processes haven't been affected by COVID, even though they have to work remotely. Because what they do is they basically access the robots, whether those robots are in cloud or whether we have implemented those robots within the customer premises for more banking, insurance kind of customers. And the testers, they just get to access everything from a browser. So things work like irrespective of where you are. So this high availability and accessibility to those environments is a great advantage, especially in those COVID times. People are realizing, oh, there was a huge benefit in moving towards this strategy and choosing this kind of cloud-based product.
Yeah, but if robots will have such massive advantages compared to traditional manual testing, what do you think? Is the robot going to replace the human tester, or are there places and topics that will stay and maybe that will benefit from automated testing? So what about man versus machine?
Well, machine wins. No, so I guess this is like one of those legendary questions that, every time we have a technology and we have a hype of the technology curve, people start to really fear, oh, it's going to replace humans and AI is going to take over, and I don't know, we will be slaves of AI and whatnot. I don't feel it in that dramatic way yet. I think it's the similar kind of, if I have to draw an analogy with it, if you think about 100 people working on a farm as against one person with one tractor working on that farm, and other 99 people doing other jobs, plus part of that 99 people actually were involved in inventing that tractor and making it more efficient. So you always have a role in that same process. Now that role just gets evolved and it gets better. If you think about manual testing, and now if you think about the repetitive and tedious part of manual testing, which is regression testing, you're basically like doing one thing over and over for every update, many hours a day. I don't think humans are made for those repetitive, tedious, bored tasks. I don't even think that humans can do them well, because we get used to things, we start making assumptions, and we get blind to things because we are so used to them. So that's the sweet spot where we stand today of test automation. So you take that boring, tedious, repetitive task out of humans because they are bad at it and they shouldn't be doing it, and give it to these robots, which can really do them well, do them in and out, do them 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, and not, we still don't have labor laws actually supporting robots, so they can work 7 days a week, and churn those massive test automation, and plus the enormous speed at which they can do, which we just can't compete with them in that. So that's the sweet spot for robots as of today. Now, when it comes to humans, it might sound again like one of those AI man versus machine talk, where it comes to feelings, and the man is the guy, or humans are the feeling people. Yeah. But for today, where we stand, I'm not saying how it's going to be 10 years from now, but a robot can tell you, given that you have fed that specification well to a robot, it's going to tell you, or to the max it can tell you, is the functional experience of an application. So if you design a calculator and say, hey, is 2 + 2 4, that's your test, a robot will tell you, yeah, it passes because it's 4. Now, a robot will not tell you how is the experience of calculating 2 + 2 = 4. Were you able to find that plus? Were you able to find where the result came? And was it intuitive enough for you as an end user? And that's something where I think humans are really, really good at. Because for today, we are designing these applications to be used by humans. So there has to be this kind of experience testing, the user experience testing there. And That's the experience part, the beautiful, more humane part of man versus machine. Second thing where humans are pretty good is exploratory testing. And a few people debate that even robots can do exploratory testing. Well, maybe they can. For sure they can. But it's not what I have been what I've been listening to. It's not, so exploratory testing is not chaotic random clicking on a user interface. Yeah, that's what robots can do, but it's not that. I think exploratory testing has a deeper meaning because when humans are interacting with an application, they're forming models in their brains of how this application should intuitively will respond to. Then they keep on updating those models on how the application is actually responding to their behavior. Now, I'm pretty sure this can be taught to a machine, but for today, this is still a task that humans do, and I think they're pretty good at it. And most of the bugs are found in even when we do production updates, we do this kind of, we use our product to test our product. It could be this kind of it's like a forever loop. Plus then we do exploratory testing with all our end users and business users, and that's where we really we are surprised what kind of things we find. And the third thing is this 80% 20% rule, when you don't want to invest 80% of efforts in automating 20% of your test automation. That's still where manuals, humans can do much better than robots.
Okay, so if we expect a nice co-evolution of human abilities in testing and robotic abilities, let's get to an end with having a look in the future. What are the trends in testing, and what will look like in the next few years? How will they affect?
So there are so Gartner invented. So Gartner is the analysts. They invented this term hyperautomation. That's one big trend. So it's like a step further than automation, where AI and I don't want to use AI and ML together, but artificial intelligence will be heavily involved in knowing the processes and automating them itself. It's this kind of hyperautomation concept. And plus there are self-healing test cases and a lot of stuff going on. But what I am interested in when it comes to trends is, one of them is I think we are more and more talking about now product quality. So and that's something which it's there, but it needs to be I think it's still there. We do talk about product quality even today, but I think it's gonna grow even further going further down the line. So instead of talking about number of test cases, number of pass fail percentage, number of test automation coverage and whatnot, people will more and more understand testing through product quality. How is the end user experience? How does that fit into my test automation strategy? So it will be more from what's the right word for it? Outside in approach. So we'll look from customer's point of view. Another is so DevOps has been there, has been pretty great. One thing that we are working on, we have a feature in our product, but the idea is still pretty novice in world today, and I think that's gonna get a lot of traction. Also a lot of people that we have shown that idea to are pretty excited about it. Is that you understand DevOps in a way that you have your processes and you have your tools and DevOps shift, and you're bringing the teams together and everything that people understand with DevOps. But currently there is no holistic view on your DevOps quality. So what I mean by that holistic view is that you do all that, you plan, you build, you test, you deploy, you learn from the experience, and you plan again. That's beautiful infinite loop. But at no point these things are connected and give you an idea which can tell you how is your DevOps health. So you know what you're planning, you know what you're pushing, what kind of features you are pushing out, you know what kind of how many commits you are making, you know how many open bugs you have, you are monitoring the performance. It doesn't tell you that, hey, your DevOps health is something, and it might not stand out when I say it's as a something, but think about it. If you were like a product manager and you would have this number, say 80 as a DevOps health, well, even then it wouldn't make any sense to you. But let's say next time when you do a production update and your DevOps health is 90 or 70, then you would understand that something is either wrong or better than before. And it will help you understand the entire process in one grasp. But that's like one another trend. And then third is then this kind of assisted decision making. For example, I have to make this decision with my product development head every time we do an update and collect these data. We don't do it anymore in this traditional fashion that, you know, we have this testing data and all these data and say, okay, should we make this update or not? Is it better or worse? We're actually using our own product to do it. But the idea is that given all that information you have of this holistic DevOps, I think humans would, the algorithms will tell you if you are better off making certain decisions and by what percentage and with what confidence. Mm-hmm. So this is like, these are the interesting trends that at least I am following.
Yeah, I guess many of us will follow them wherever you are on the journey. So I think that's what we wanted to share with you, our insights, our way from starting test automation to offering a cloud-based testing as a service solution. And this is a little hello, a little greeting from our colleagues in Finland. I think that's the way they would like to see their job when robots do the work.
Yeah, it's not from our colleagues. It's so it's a university magazine. So it's a university engineering university magazine, and they make all kind of funny things about, you know, the slogans. So it's like a picture they drew from testing. How does robots feel when they are testing from cloud? It's like a comic. Yeah,
that is when testers are in heaven and having robots do their job.
Yeah.
All right, so that's it for today, nearly. But what we just would like you to offer is, if you have any interest in testing how this cloud-based solution works. So there's that free version. You can just click there, install your free version. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to call or send an email to Nikhil or to me. Nochmal auf Deutsch, vielen, vielen lieben Dank für alle, die das mitgemacht haben und die sich auf dieses Experiment eines doch weitgehend englischen Vortrags eingelassen haben. Wir hoffen sehr, es hat euch und Ihnen Spaß gemacht, es hat was gebracht. Und zum Abschluss wollen wir gerne nochmal eine ganz kurze Umfrage machen, welche Themen euch vielleicht noch mehr interessieren würden, auch im Hinblick auf unsere Abendveranstaltung, auf die Expertenrunde. Da würde ich jetzt einfach bitten, die Kollegen den zweiten Umfrage zu starten.
Genau, ich mache euch jetzt mal die zweite Umfrage an. Und zwar haben wir jetzt hier eine Multi-Choice-Umfrage. Jetzt müsste man sie sehen.
Ja.
Auch wieder einfach mal kurz klicken und abstimmen und dann sehen wir gleich, wie viel Prozent. Das geht ja schnell.
Super.
Super.
Okay, 89%. Ich glaube, das ist gut für eine Hochrechnung. Wir haben einen klaren Fokus bei dem Thema Web, Mobile und Desktop-Testing und Cloud. Auch IoT ist ein Thema und ja, ich hoffe sehr, wir können uns heute Abend um 18 Uhr wiedersehen, zumindest mit den ASQF-Members, und ich freue mich sehr. Vielen Dank auch an die Kolleginnen und Kollegen von ASQF für die tolle Vorbereitung.
Vielen Dank für das tolle Webinar.
Habt ihr
also,
noch was?
thank you.
Sind noch Fragen gekommen, die wir spontan noch beantworten sollen?
Genau, eine Frage haben wir noch.
Okay, one more question.
Die würden wir gerne, also wie gesagt, vielleicht nochmal den Hinweis, ich weiß nicht, ob das alle mitbekommen haben, wir haben hier in der Seite eine Fragefunktion, gerne da kurz die Fragen eingeben, wenn welche sind. Oder wenn erst später Fragen kommen, dann auch zur Diskussion heute Abend. Wir haben das jetzt auch für alle geöffnet, also auch gerne anmelden und noch dabei sein und dann bei der Diskussion einfach mitdiskutieren. Vielen Dank für den interessanten Vortrag. Und wir freuen uns natürlich, wenn wir den einen oder anderen auch begeistern können und auch bei dem ASQF mitzumachen. Wir sind ja ein großes Netzwerk, 1300 Mitglieder im Dachbereich und freuen uns natürlich auch zu wachsen. Und für alle NetWeek-Teilnehmer haben wir jetzt auch das Angebot, dass wir die letzten 3 Monate von 2020 auch nochmal kostenlos zum Schnuppern nutzen können und dann erst nächstes Jahr sozusagen der Jahresbeitrag 80 € sozusagen erhoben wird. Also gern einfach mal reinschnuppern und mit dabei sein. Auch für unsere NetWeek-Teilnehmer haben wir auch noch ein kleines Gewinnspiel dabei. Wir können wieder 5 Tester-T-Shirts und 5 Fachbücher gewinnen. Einfach eine E-Mail an info@asqf.de mit dem Stichwort Buch oder T-Shirt und dann nimmt man automatisch an der Verlosung teil. Und genau, also ich hatte ja auch schon erwähnt, Mitarbeit ist immer sehr gewünscht bei uns im ASQF. Wir freuen uns auch also über die aktive Mitarbeit in Fachgruppen oder Arbeitsgruppen oder auch einfach nur beim Zuhören und Zusehen, ob das die Test-Challenge ist, der Agile Brunch, Quality Day im November oder jegliche anderen Netweek-Veranstaltungen zum Beispiel. Also Sie können sich ja jederzeit noch anmelden bei den Netweek-Sachen, die jetzt noch laufen. Und wie gesagt, die Diskussion auch nicht verpassen heute. Auch wieder mit den beiden Experten von gerade dabei und noch vielen anderen, auch von den vorherigen Webinaren. Ja, wir freuen uns einfach auf Sie. Und ja, nochmal, thank you, Nikhil, also for your answers in English. Kiitos to everyone who is listening from Finland. And yeah, so if there are any questions, there's one actually. Let me check. We have the question, what do you think is a good programmer-tester ratio in different levels of automating the testing of software? You can see the questions also on the site if you want to open them to see.
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know if there's like an absolute universal answer for it, but I can tell you like my experience of what a good ratio has been. So more successful test automation project that I was working for, we had a team of 3 testers and 2 developers for every function. Now I'm not sure like what does it mean, the different levels of automating it, but like 3:2 has been like a good ratio in my experience, but I'm not saying it's an absolute. It really depends on the functions and what does the team actually do.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wow, now more questions coming in. So don't run away. We have a question here. Is Quentin more desktop-orientated testing or script-based?
So what I'm understanding with desktop-oriented testing, are you referring to recording, playing kind of desktop-orienting, or so? Well, it's if I just understand how I understand this question. So we have this technology called pacewords, and pacewords are, you may call it script based, but it's pacewords are keywords. So like click text, for example, is a keyword. It's a paceword. So either you write test cases in those, or then you can also record test cases. But what that recorder does, it basically translates that your recording step into a password script, so you can read it. So it's for documentation, you can understand it, your business owners can read it, and it's very, very simple. Like it's as I said, it's like click text or verified text kind of passwords. You can actually check the list of passwords if you're interested in on a help page. So help.base.kentinel.com. I can write it down somewhere. That's one idea, but the core philosophy behind passwords, which is the coolest, and I don't think there is like any other products that are doing it, is that it's platform agnostic. So when you write click text something, it works. The same line of test can work on a web application. It can also work on a mobile application. It can also work on a desktop native application. And behind that passwords are many different strategies or technologies, if you will, that it relies on. For example, it can rely on like a web driver, or it can rely then on computer vision or APM or other mobile technologies. And those are all our like we have developed them in-house. But that's cool because, you know, as an end tester or as an end manual tester transforming to test automation expert, you don't have to worry about a lot of coding, first of all, and second, that you need to learn different frameworks for different platforms, because you can just learn one password, and then with that you can shoot web applications, mobile applications, and native applications. Then there was, do you have a recommendation for cloud systems for automating Windows application tests? Well, if you would ask me, then I would recommend myself. I'm sorry, but I have to do that. So what we do is for Windows applications and for applications which are behind a firewall, you can basically do like an RDP connection to those, and then on the RDP, the robots can test on that RDP using computer vision. But the test cases will still look like click text OK or click text on cross or something. What's your opinion also automating acceptance tests? Yeah, well, functional testing is pretty close to acceptance testing, but it also depends on like where do you which is the last version of your testing. If for you it's like towards the end, you want to have this kind of acceptance testing, which is really talking about, you know, that the functions are working as they should, but the experience is also how you want it to be, then that's a place where I would rather have that acceptance testing as still manual. But if your application is such that the function is functional, or the integrated functional testing of the integrated applications is good enough for you, then why not have it as test automation? Then it must be script based.
I think that's the answer.
That's an answer.
Yeah, that's the answer for it. Yeah, so it's yeah. Plus, what you can also do is you can create models. So we have a technology partnership with Conformic. So what you can do is like you can create models of complex applications, and that model can then churn out those test cases. So you don't have to write them. The model, that's model-based testing. Or then, as I said, like you can record, and that the recording will translate. One of the reasons why we wanted to have it script-based and the kind of scripts that we use is it's like a lot of studies show that that's the most maintainable way of doing test automation, as against if you are just recording and translating into a coded script, because then you don't feel like a lot of time is spent on investigating and fixing it. How do I start test automating in a grown monolith? Okay, I don't understand that question. If you want to start test automation, just generally test automation, then we have recently launched Pace Academy. So you can basically go to kentinel.com and sign up for basic courses. They're all free. And as here it is also mentioned that you can get a container-based free version for yourself. So since we are built on robot framework, what we have is that our free personal subscription is basically like a community giving back to community. So that's like for you, for your personal use, personal projects, and it's for lifetime. So you have like a lot of things for free there. So you do the courses and then use the product to learn automation. And if you, then move on at different levels, of course. But I'm not sure what it meant by grown monolith.
Okay, I think that's everything I see in our question tool. So thank you very much for answering the question, for the webinar, for everything. And we're lucky to have you later in the discussion back. So everyone is welcome to join. Thanks a lot. Auch nochmal in Deutsch. Vielen Dank. Und das war's erstmal soweit zu diesem Webinar. Also, bis später.
Dankeschön. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.